to record 12 big meetings and I did 11 big meetings and the one I didn't record was not good. Okay, fine. Is it recording now? Yes, recording. Okay.
So I'll tell you one other thing. You know, I've had the shingles. Back when I had COVID, some of you that were here remember how bad that was. And our medical, our doctor just dumped me. I wound up having to get a shot in Portland at a place that wasn't my doctor in the parking lot. I had to pull down my pants in a parking lot to get a shot. And it got a great big, so I got disgusted with the medical system, to say the least. And so when I went in about the shingles, I realized that, you know, my blood sugar and blood pressure were not where they needed to be. So this is one of those times you say it was what it took to get me back in a doctor's office. And I haven't had any carbohydrates in a week and a half. So it's not always bad. Sometimes you find we learn things from these situations. And the shingles is really just my case of it. It's not that bad. I know some of you have had much worse. But sometimes, as we say, things work out.
Do you want to start with the language
No,
first?
go ahead.
Okay, where we left off last week was that Leah has had 4 boys and Rachel's maidservant has had 2 sons. So we are up to Jacob having 6 sons at this point. And I'm going to do a spoiler alert for those of you who don't know. Jacob is going to have 12 sons because his 12 sons eventually become the 12 tribes of Israel. So we have 6 and he's going to have 12, and he is also going to have a daughter.
What else? You said you had something else?
No, not anything else.
Well, go ahead and share this. So before you do, hold on.
Yes.
I want to show you this. I always think it's important. We get some distorted ideas about things. And what I'm about to show you is going to make this lesson make a lot more sense. What is going on with these 2 sisters and all the children is going to make more sense. But it also will kind of, I think, change maybe your outlook or attitude about some things you've been told, about, especially about the Old Testament. So let's take a look at it. So what you see here in Hebrew, that actually, can we pull that thing? Yeah, there you go.
What is it?
That's good.
Okay.
That's good. Before modern Hebrew, there was an older written language they mostly called Proto-Hebrew, which is the old root of it. And they were symbols, not normal letters. The word for mother, right? The mother of the household is 2 symbols. And you see on the right that picture that looks like an ox, okay? That character is called Aleph. You notice it sounds like, well, Aleph, and the next letter in the Hebrew alphabet is Bet, Aleph, Bet. That's alphabet. A whole lot of our language, a whole lot of our letters are based on the Old Hebrew, and we just don't know it. But the ox, Aleph, signifies strength. It's always used as strong something, okay? And you can understand that, it's an ox. But then the next symbol that looks sort of like an M with a little extra thing. First of all, that letter, it translates into the M in ours. It's amazing how much of our language dates back and tracks back. But what that symbol is for water. You see the waves in it, okay? Now put those 2 together, and remember, Hebrew is written from right to left. So it is strong water. And what would happen is when they rendered animals, and we can go and pull that off. They've seen it. You understand? Yeah, I think we'd rather just talk to people. Strong water. When they rendered animals, they boiled down the leftovers, and this stuff came to the top, and it got used as glue, right? I mean, it was, you can imagine cartilage and all that collagen and stuff. and they used it as glue. And that's strong water. That is water that has become strong, become like glue. And so the word for mother, imma or im, is strong water. And the mother is the glue that holds the family together. And it was on the sheet. It's actually, I mean, they had the story of it down there. But the role of the mother, they are literally seen as strong water, as the glue that connects the family, that binds it, that holds things together. And so, two things about it. In general, we've been given this idea that men didn't have any use for women. They didn't have any appreciation. They just treat. It's not true, especially within Hebrew society. The mother is the glue that holds the family together. And you think about how important the family is, that if the mother is the one that holds it together, it is a very respected place. And it's baked into their culture, it is baked into their language, right? So now you keep that in mind, and then you look at what's going on with Rachel and Leah and this contest over having children and over having sons. The mothers hold the family together, and each one of them wants to be the one, not just kind of part of it. They want to be the one that's the strong water, that's the glue that holds this, and they've got, I'm sure he's told them this prophecy that they become a great nation. Well, they want to be the mother of the great nation, right? And so this fight that's going on, or this rivalry, makes a lot more sense if you understand what is, and they're not unaware. It's one thing when you say a word mother. For us, it just means that's your, the person who gave birth to you. But when you say strong water, and you know what that means, every time they see that, every time they talk about the mother, it is this idea that she's the glue that holds the family together. It's inescapable. And so they see it every single day. And they're very much aware of this concept. So now let's go read about Rachel and Leah, and maybe that.
Why it said Paleo Hebrew?
Paleo is the other, proto or paleo, and there's actually one more term. It's because academics just have to come up with something new and different. It is Proto-Hebrew, Paleo-Hebrew, and the other one I can't remember. And it just depends on which academic you're talking to.
So it's like original Hebrew. Is that
Original, yeah,
Hebrew?
the ones that,
For sure.
yeah, that's right.
Do you want to close
I
the
will.
sliding door? There's a door that comes in before our door, and if it's not closed all the way, it creaks continuously. Just to make sure everybody knows the names, we've got Jacob. He's the man of the house, and he was in love with Rachel, the second. Found Rachel very attractive. She was not the oldest daughter. He is now married to both Leah and Rachel, and both Leah and Rachel have servants. Leah's maidservant is Zilpah, and Rachel's maidservant is Bilhah. And so those are the characters. We left off at Genesis chapter 30, verse 9. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she gave her servant Zilpah to Jacob as a wife. And Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "How fortunate." So she named him Gad. When Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, Leah said, "How happy I am, for the woman call me happy." So she named him Asher. Now during the wheat harvest, Reuben went out and found some mandrakes in the field. And Reuben was Leah's son. When he brought them to his mother, Rachel begged Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But Leah replied, "Is it not enough that you've taken away my husband? Now you want to take my son's mandrakes as well?" "Very well," said Rachel. "He may sleep with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came in from the field that evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come with me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he slept with her that night.
Yeah, it gets twisted. You see that, you know, you read stories and see things on TV about polygamy, about these arrangements. This gets you into some of the reality of how it must have worked, and it's not a pretty thing. We still, last week, we talked about Leah wanting Jacob to love her, and he just doesn't. And it's a very, I mean, it's a sad story. This is a twisted thing. But the mandrakes, they are real. There's a plant, and it's the root. Sometimes the way they grow, they have little branches that looks like arms and legs. And I've been told that's why but they didn't originally name them in English anyway. But these roots are used, they're believed to increase fertility. And there are people today who still think that. I mean, they still get sold for a lot more than you would expect. And so what happens is the son goes out and finds some, and they're not like real plentiful, so they're worth something. And everyone believes that they increase fertility, and you see how important having children and having this line is. And so they're they would be expensive. And Rachel, who's had not been able to conceive children, says, "Give me some of your son's mandrakes." They're still sisters. And if this rivalry, if it seems odd that she would do that, they're still sisters. And so Leah makes this kind of ugly comment. "What, it's not enough? You stole my husband," which she really didn't. "But you stole my husband, now you want to steal my son's mandrakes?" And so they come to this arrangement. "I'll give you the mandrakes, but you have to give your husband, Jacob," my husband too, by the way, her husband, "but you have to give your husband to me for the night." And it just sort of goes that way. And if you've never really thought in depth about these polygamous relationships, you should probably pause and consider things like this. I mean, you're going to have a reality. These are real human beings. So there we go.
Well,
Anyway,
and I like the part here at the end that when Jacob comes into the field, we've always been taught sort of that like women were second-class citizens and didn't have much to say. Here is Leah, the wife he doesn't love, telling the man of the house, "You must come with me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." I just think to myself, wow.
yeah, that's the reality of it.
Verse 17, "And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore a fifth son to Jacob. Then Leah said, 'God has rewarded me for giving my maidservant to my husband.' So she named him Issachar. Again, Leah conceived and bore a sixth son to Jacob. 'God has given me a good gift,' she said. 'This time my husband will honor me, because I have bore him six sons.' And she named him Zebulun. After that, Leah gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah."
Yeah, that's to me always struck me as kind of sad. All of these boys have names that mean something. And I know Dinah probably does, but you can see she's saying that now at least my husband will respect me because I've borne him a fifth son. And he doesn't. And then there's a sixth. And I presume that there were no mandrakes involved in the sixth. But you notice what she says is she says, God, because she gets pregnant, she says, "God has rewarded me for giving my maidservant to my husband." And once again, I hope we see ourselves in these things. We do something, and it's never was the intention that we should, have this polygamous relationship, and we get that clarified in other places. But she's decided that the reason that she conceives another child is because she's being rewarded for giving her maidservant to her husband. I don't understand the twisted logic in that, but that's what she says. So each one of these boys has a name that means joy or honor, or all of these things that they say. And then she has a daughter, and she named her Dinah next, and that's it. That's the end of it. It is the lineage of the sons that carries on the line. Now, one other thing I should mention, I meant to mention before, but when we were in Israel, I don't even know how it came up, but the question is, what determines if you're a Jew or not? And the answer, I mean, the real answer is if your mother was a Jew. The lineage of being a Jew is carried down from the mother. And so if you have a Jewish mother and some other nationality father, you're still a Jew. If your father is a Jew and your mother is not, it gets complicated. But the lineage of that is carried through the mother. Things are not ever as simple as we try and make them. But just the same, when we have a daughter, her name is Dinah, and there's no more discussion.
And so where we are in the count now, Leah's had 7 children, 6 boys and 1 son, and her maidservant, which counts for her also, has 2 sons. So on Leah's side were 8 sons and 1 daughter to Rachel, who has none. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and gave birth to a son. God has taken away my shame, she said, and she named him Joseph and said, may the Lord add to me another son.
I don't know, not much to say about that. It says God remembered her, and we tend to forget, there's a plan here, and literally God does remember her. I mean, she winds up with a son of her, her own lineage, and God does, but they all become part of the big plan, and that I think is more important than that one son.
And Joseph, it says in the footnote, means may he add.
May he add. And what she said is, I appreciate the one, but another would be nice. Would you give me now get you, thank you for doing this, now give me another. That's literally what's going on here. And again, do we not see ourselves in that? Do we not see that?
Thank you for answering one prayer.
Yeah, all right, that's good. But what have you done for me lately? And could you do, now let's move to the next thing that I need from you. That is us.
Now, after Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, and remember, Laban is Rachel and Leah's father. So Jacob said to Laban, send me on my way so I can return to my homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and that I may go on my way. You know how hard I have worked for you. But Laban replied, if I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. So he added, name your wages and I will pay them. Then Jacob answered, you know how I have served you and how your livestock have thrived under my care. Indeed, you have had very little before my arrival, but now your wealth has increased many times over. The Lord has blessed you wherever I set foot. But now, when may I also provide for my own household?
That's good.
Okay.
So, and again, I always want to try and show you the human beings and what's going on, so that these things actually come alive, so that you say, okay, I can see real human beings, not some make-believe thing. So after Rachel has Joseph, Jacob begins to get restless. He says, I think it's about time to go back to my homeland. He was always told that he was going to be going back there. And so he goes to Laban. And by the way, if these names get confusing, if you think Mary just introduced a new character, It's because you have to translate Laman into Laban, so it's the same guy,
I'm sorry.
just under a new name.
That's all right.
But Laban, he goes to Laban, his father-in-law, the father of his two wives, and he says, look, you know, I have worked really hard for you, but I think it's time for me to move on. And Laban says, oh, if I've found favor in your sight, if you care about me, you know, if we get along, and he's laying the guilt trip on him, if I found favor in your sight, just stay. I know how much you've done for me. And you know, he says, in fact, I learned through divination, and that's always some kind of a, you know, reading tea leaves or rolling the bones or whatever. And I don't know how this comes up, but he says he understands now that Laban has been blessed because of Joseph. Laban has gotten wealthy, and wasn't before Joseph showed up. And he says, I understand now that the reason I'm so successful and wealthy is because of you. And you've got to think that Jacob's son, Joseph, winds up down in Egypt. Okay, if you don't know the story, we'll get to it. But he winds up down in Egypt, and he becomes the first in line after Pharaoh, and Egypt prospers because Joseph is a great manager and a hard worker. Yes. Well, this is the same thing. Laban has gotten rich because of Jacob. And so he's smart enough to say, I know I'm rich because of you. Name your price. Tell me what it'll take to keep you here. And I explained last week that when you're in that part of the world and someone says that to you, they're not really saying they're going to pay whatever you ask. You know, they're working on you. You know, tell me what it is. And if you come up too high, they'll negotiate. If you come up too low, you just got, cheated out of what you could have gotten. That's the way things are done. And Jacob responds, I have worked hard for you. And you look at all you've got. When I came here, you had hardly anything. Now your flocks are huge. You have all these servants. You've gotten rich off of, and so Jacob is negotiating back. He's reminding him, even though Laban has already said, I know I'm rich because of you. This is a negotiation. And Jacob responds and tells him, all I've done for you. So if we're gonna haggle about price, let's set who owes who what.
And then at the end he says, but now when may I provide for my own household?
And that's the bottom line. I've done all this stuff for you, but I'm the head of a household now. I have 2 wives, as you well know. I have all these kids, and it's time for me to, how about a little something for yours truly? You're getting rich, and my family we're effectively servants. So when do I get to do something for my own family? And you see in that the expectation that Laban says, okay, let's strike a deal. You get something, I get the rest. This is negotiating in the Middle East.
You do not need to give me anything, Jacob replied. If you do this one thing for me, I will keep my shepherding and keeping your flocks. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. These will be my wages. So my honesty will testify for me when you come to check on my wages in the future. If I have any goats that are not speckled or spotted, or any lambs that are not dark-colored, they will be considered stolen. Agreed, said Laban. Yet let it be as you have said. And that very day, Laban removed all the streaked or spotted male goats and every speckled or spotted female goat, every one that had any white on it, and every dark-colored lamb, and he placed them under the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob was shepherding the rest of Laban's flocks.
So there's the negotiation, and you know he's gonna ask for something. And Jacob is wise enough, and I guess, you know, tricky enough. He already has a proposal ready. And he says, how about if this? All of the goats and lambs and everything that are off colored, that you know don't look quite right, the second rate ones will be mine. And all of the prime livestock that looks right will be yours. And he says, you don't have to worry now about me cheating you. Earlier, back when he was telling Laban what he'd done for him, he said, you know, I didn't, anytime an animal got eaten, I made good. Anytime something was stolen, I made good on it. You haven't had to, I mean, I haven't cheated you, but there's always that concern. How do they don't have, they're not branding these lambs and goats and sheep. How do you keep track of who's belong to who? You have to separate flocks and all. But Jacob has said, here, I've got a way that we can do this, that there will never be any doubt whose livestock belongs to who. You're going to get all the prime perfect colored ones, and I'm going to get all the yucky, you know, second rate ones. And a lamb that is spotless comes up later in the Bible, doesn't it? The idea, I mean, that goes all the way through to Passover and everything. The lamb that's spotless is valuable. And Laban hears that, and what Jacob tells him, by the way, is, and that way you don't have to worry about me cheating you. We can look at a glance and see what belongs to who. And if you find anything in my flocks that is perfect colored, they can be considered stolen. Nobody is, I'm not going to be able to cheat you because it'll be readily apparent which are mine. And Laban hears it and says, wow, that seems like a good thing to me. Yeah, let's do that. And then
What does
he immediately goes and gathers his sons and has them go to the flock and separate all of the off-colored animals. The striped, the speckled, the dark colored lambs, right? He gets them to gather them up and drive them a 3 days journey away. And so now what that means is Jacob is starting with nothing. He took all the ones because they didn't have this agreement when all these ones were born. We didn't have any agreement. So those are still mine. And I'm going to get them all off, you know, sequestered, so that you can't get to any of them. And now you can start and let's see where it gets you. They're always working an angle. Yeah.
And then the other thing here is all of a sudden, this is the first time that we heard that Laban had sons.
That's true.
And so we don't know it to be a fact, but one would think that the sons came later after Jacob had already come. So Jacob has been there. We find out in a little while that he's been there now almost 20 years. And so, and one of the things that always intrigues me about the Bible is the time stuff. I mean, he has been there 20 years working for Laban. And after he came, he probably had, you know, he probably had multiple wives too. And one of his multiple wives gave birth to sons. So these sons are considerably younger than Jacob. Jacob, however, took fresh branches of poplar, almond, and plane trees and peeled the bark, exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he set the peeled branches in the watering troughs in front of the flocks coming in to drink. So when the flocks were in heat and came to drink, they mated in front of the branches, and they bore young that were streaked or speckled or spotted. Jacob set apart the young, but made the rest face the streaked, dark colored sheep in Laban's flocks. Then he set his own stock apart and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females of the flock were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in full view of the animals. so that they would breed in front of the branches. But if the animals were weak, he did not set out the branches. So the weaker animals went to Laban and the stronger ones to Jacob. Thus Jacob became exceedingly prosperous. He owned large flocks, maidservants and men servants, and camels and donkeys.
So
Wow.
We're gonna-
And this is family.
we're-
So anytime you think, is there a normal family out there? There's not.
we get this story of the branches and the white bark underneath. And rather than talk a whole lot about it now, we're going to read here in a minute something, and then we'll come back to it, and maybe it will make more sense. What Jacob does, the one thing you can be sure of, is Jacob is doing selective breeding. He's making sure that the speckled and off-colored rams mate with the strongest of the female sheep or goats. And so he winds up with an abnormal amount of the livestock being born speckled and spotted and off-colored, right? He's doing selective breeding. He has decided that by peeling the branches and, you know, that he's going to make them come out with streaks and spots. We'll come back to that. But Laban hauled off all of the speckled and spotted ones, and Jacob immediately turns it around and begins a selective breeding project where he makes sure that he gets wealthier, and the weaker animals belong to Laban, the stronger animals belong to Jacob.
There's gotta be a lengthy departure here, because all this takes time to work out.
Yeah.
I would think so,
And
yeah.
that's, once again, it's the time, you know, you read this stuff and then you think, okay, 2 days passed. No, these are years. This is a long process.
I see.
Chapter 31. Now Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken away all that belonged to our father and built all this wealth at our father's expense. And Jacob saw that the countenance of Laban, that his attitude towards him had changed. Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your father and to your kindred, and I will be with you.
Let's stop there, because this is. So Laban knows that he's been successful and he has gotten wealthy. He knows that he's successful because of Jacob, and he strikes this deal, but it doesn't turn out like he expects. They start noticing Jacob is getting wealthier and wealthier faster than they are. And
They're probably also losing ground because theirs is the weaker ones, right?
they probably are, they could be, and I think they probably are not as hardworking as Jacob, and their fortunes have taken a turn in the wrong direction. And the sons of Laban begin to grumble. Hey, wait a minute. Bottom line, this all came from us. And now it's us because they're the sons who inherit. This, by all rights, this is all of this wealth Jacob has is really ours. And we've all seen something, at least, that you can recognize in that. They're jealous, they're envious, and they convince themselves that the wealth Jacob has should rightfully belong to them. And Jacob begins to pick up on it. You don't hide things like that. He says he could tell from Laban's countenance that his attitude had changed. Well, that's the case. And sooner or later, these things come to a boil. They come to a head, and they eventually are, you know what's going to happen. They're going to confront him, and they're going to say, hey, you know what? We're taking ours back. And those things often get bloody even in this time. And Jacob sees the handwriting on the wall, which is another biblical story, by the way. Maybe we'll do it sometime. But he sees the handwriting on the wall, and he says, you know, I think maybe it's time for us to get out of here. We need to gather up our stuff and pack it back home to where it came from.
But then it says the Lord said to Jacob.
And then it says, that's right, the Lord said to Jacob, and when he wanted to go before, he wouldn't have had all this wealth. He would have been going back to his country without a whole lot. And instead, he stayed, and this time it says the Lord says to him, and I never know how exactly, but he says, okay, I told you you're going to be going back. It's time now.
And there's a lesson of waiting on God's timing, not on ours. Because Jacob didn't go back the first time. He waited to listen. So verse 4 of chapter 31. So Jacob sent word out and called Rachel and Leah to the field where his flocks were. And he told them, I can see from your father's countenance that his attitude towards me has changed. But the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength. And although he has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said, the speckled will be your wages, then the whole flock bore speckled offspring. If he said, the streaked will be your wages, then the whole flock bore streaked offspring. Thus God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. When the flocks were breeding, I saw in a dream that the streaked, spotted, and speckled males were mating with females. In that dream, the angel of God said to me, Jacob, and I replied, here I am. Look, he said, you see that all the males that are mating with the flock are streaked, spotted, or speckled, for I have seen all that Laban has done to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar and made a solemn vow to me. Now get up and leave this land at once and return to your native land.
Okay, let's go with that. So now we see Jacob has decided we probably need to get out of here pretty soon. And he goes to his two wives and explains to them. He says, you know, I've worked hard for your father, and he's changed the deal on me 10 times. And I'm sure that's happened. You know, he says, well, I know we said this, but I think we should do this. And he's constantly changing the terms, just like he did giving Leah as the wife before Rachel. Laban has been working him. He says, you know, I've been good to your dad, and your dad's been blessed because of it. And yet, when Laban says the spotted will be yours, they're all being born spotted. And when he says the streaked animals will be yours, they're all being born streaked. And so what's happened, he says, is that God has taken the wealth from Laban and given it to me. And he then says he had a dream when he started tending Laban's flocks, and God showed him that the off-colored males were mating with the females. But what he says is, I am involved in this. I'm the reason these animals are going to be born this way. And so the deal with the sticks, the peeled branches, and the water and everything else, I think, and you know, I can't say for sure, but when you know that this dream is here, and God has said, you're going to be blessed because of me. Jacob thinks I should help things out a little bit and do the trick with the sticks, you know, some old wives' tale. Just because he does that does not mean this was God's instructions to him, or that it was responsible for the animals being born that way. But we tend to want to help God out, you know. I know you got a plan, but I think you need some help. I keep saying this week after week because they keep doing it. That's the lesson.
And we keep doing it too.
I know you got a plan, but I'm gonna add my, you know, I'm gonna give you a little boost. And I think that's what Jacob has done. Nonetheless, he explains this to them, and he says, you know, we got to leave, and we've been blessed. He's telling them, I didn't cheat your father. That's the bottom line. I didn't cheat him. I've been good to him. He's gotten rich. Because you can imagine, if they're thinking the same thing that Laban's sons are thinking, he's going to have a revolt in his own house. So that's what he starts out telling them. I've been good to him, but it's time to leave.
And once again, we've been taught that, you know, women didn't have any big role. And here is Jacob talking to his two wives and saying, and, you know, I guess he's making the decision, but he's still letting them know how it all, it's not like he's not including them.
It's never as simple. And the idea, if you believed everything that we've been taught, Jacob would have gone to his two wives and says, hey, gather up the stuff, we're going. But he doesn't. He comes out and has this discussion with them, and he's trying to persuade them. So maybe, it's not equal, and we can talk about that later too. But the women are not they do get consideration in this. They can make his life miserable.
And Rachel and Leah replied, do we have any portion or inheritance left in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as outsiders? Not only has he sold us, but he has certainly squandered what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. So do whatever God has told you. Then Jacob got up, put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock before him, along with all the possessions he had acquired in Pandan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now, while Laban was out shearing his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household idols. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by telling him that he was running away, by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all his possessions, crossed the Euphrates, and headed for the hill country of Gilead.
So the first thing is Jacob tells them that, and it says that Rachel and Leah have this conversation between them. There's been this rivalry going on with the children, okay? But they're still sisters. And this is another thing we see in families. Nobody fights with my family but me. They'll defend each other, but they also are having this discussion, and they said, hey, come to think of it, we're rich. Everything that God has taken away from our father, he's given to us, and we're rich. And it's really not to their advantage to stick around and have Laban and his sons come and take all this stuff back. And they said, didn't he basically sell us? He didn't do right by us. And now he squandered what he was paid. Well, Jacob gave Laban great wealth. And when they sort of separated, Jacob keeps getting wealthy, and Laban and his sons are not getting wealthy. I don't think they work as hard as Jacob. They're certainly not blessed the way Jacob is. And these two sisters say, this probably is a good time for us to, as it is, we're here, we're sort of, if Laban takes over, we're dependent on him, and he's not very good at this. Or we can leave with Jacob right now. It's like, let's make a deal. You can have what's behind the curtain. And we've got a lot of stuff. Let's pack up and go. And so they do. Jacob sends the livestock out in front. But Rachel, the beloved wife, takes an opportunity to sneak into Laban's tent and steal the household gods, the idols.
So what was the motive for that?
Well, that's a good question. If you didn't hear it, Bob asked what was the motive for that. And we don't exactly know. Is she wanting to take these, foreign gods with her? Does she think they're valuable? And at some point they maybe worth some money? Are they status symbols? Or possibly is this just sort of a poke in Laban's eye for the way?
Or is she trading-
All the good stuff to him, to Laban.
We don't really know. What we know is, and this is kind of important, it tells us she was wrong. She did something wrong. And it also says that Jacob deceived his father-in-law Laban by not telling him they were leaving. He literally, and this is the advantage to being nomadic, is that you can pack up and leave in the middle of the night. He literally does that. He just says, and it doesn't take long as you've heard all the stuff, the sheep, you can leave in a hurry. But it says that he deceived his father-in-law Laban by not telling him. So this is going to come up later. Laban doesn't like it, but Jacob should have told the father-in-law, and he should have left with his head held high, and instead he sneaks off.
And Rachel shouldn't have stole these things.
Rachel obviously should not have stolen these.
And could it have been that Rachel prayed to these idols and needed them for protection?
Yeah, I said that. If she
Oh,
was,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
it could have been. That becomes ingrained in people.
Yeah.
And so she may well have wanted them for, to pray to. We don't know.
On the third day, Laban was informed that Jacob had fled. 3 days later.
It's how apartment managers find out.
So he took his relatives with him, pursued Jacob for 7 days, and overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. But that night, God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream and warned him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." Now Jacob had pitched his tents in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there as well. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You have deceived me and carried off my daughters like captives of war. Why did you run away secretly and deceive me without even telling me? I would have sent you away with joy and singing, with tambourines and harps. But you did not even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. Now you have done a foolish thing. I have power to do you great harm. But last night, the God of your father said to me, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.' Now you have gone off because you long for your father's house. But why have you stolen my goods?" "I was afraid," Jacob answered.
Let's talk
Okay.
about that one because Laban finds out that he's taken off, and he gathers together all the men he can, and it's not a small amount, and they go right out after him. Jacob is driving, and his people are driving all of his livestock. Laban is not. This is a posse. This is an Old West posse gotten together to ride them down, and they hurry to catch up, and they do catch up. And we're told Laban gets this in a dream. He gets an instruction from God. Don't say anything to Jacob, good or bad. In other words, leave him alone. It's pretty clear from that the plan was they were going to ride out, catch Jacob, and force him to come back. They might have killed him and brought the daughters and all the livestock back. In fact, it's not, that's a real possibility. There's no doubt Laban is mad about this. And Laban plays the sort of that grieving relative. He says, why didn't you just tell me you were leaving? We would have had a big party and I would have sent you away with a big celebration. That's not true. You just do. He doesn't go to all this trouble writing him down just to wave goodbye and to kiss the grandchildren. And he actually tells them, I have the power to do great harm to you. He's brought enough people along to have turned this into a fight and won. I have the power. So it tells you this is what he was thinking. But he says, last night, your God spoke to me and said, don't say anything to Jacob. This is God's providence. This is things happening at the time they were appointed to happen. And Laban knows enough. He's understood now that God has blessed Jacob, that God is with him, and he's not going to cross this. So now they're going to play nice.
And we're at time.
Are we?
Yeah.
Okay.
So once again, a
How did that
cliffhanger.
happen?
I don't know. So we've left with, now he's accusing him of taking his things.
Yeah, that's the other thing. And so this is still contrary to the instruction. And we will say that much. He gets to the end of this and he goes, you did me wrong here. And you didn't even let me say goodbye to my grandkids. And I get all that. But with everything you have, why did you see fit to steal my stuff? And that's where we'll leave it for next week. God, we pray that we see in this your hand at work. And by seeing it, that we can see your hand at work in the world around us. We recognize in these human beings things about ourselves. And we see the good things, but we also see the unworthy things. And we pray that you would show us, bring it to our attention, that we tend to want to make our own will happen. We tend to want to help you with these things. Help us with our trusting. Today, that's my prayer, that you would help us to trust the plan that you've had that's gone for so long, and that you care about the good that happens in our lives. Help us, God, to remember those people around us who also need our help. Those ones we prayed for, Gene, we don't even know what's wrong, but we know it's important to him that he have the support from this group, the prayers. Help us remember Gene this week and bring him back to us. That's what we want. Amen.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. You can unmute yourselves.
What was her reasoning?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
thank you.
Thank you. Have a good Sunday.
Everybody.
Well, y'all
Thank you.
get an
Have a great
address
week.
in San Antonio that we can send Jean a card or thoughts?
Yep, it's in the chat.
Oh, it is?
You'll
Oh, I missed
send out an email,
His-
yes, because.
His home address.
Guys, in your,
Yeah, the boats.
Yeah, there we go. So it's Jean Garcia, 4620 Highway 35 North, Rockport 78382. Did you get
Oh,
that?
okay. We sent one home a couple weeks ago. I was thinking though that he's in San Antonio now, so I was thinking a card today where he is.
He is in Rockport.
Oh, he is. Okay.
Yeah, he is in Rockport. He was in the hospital in Victoria and in ICU, but he came home 2 days ago to Rockport. So he is here right now. That I know. Okay. Thank you, guys.
All right. Have a great week, Mary and everybody. Bye.
Congrats, Jack.